Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever walked into a room and felt the tension before a single word was spoken? Absolutely. They never absorb the poison, written in a powerful and emotionally engaging tone, without subheadings or a formal conclusion, just pure, immersive speech. They never absorb the poison, not because they're cold, but because they're clear. Clear about who they are, clear about what they stand for, and most of all, clear about what they will never allow inside their mental and emotional space. You see, when toxicity walks in, through gossip, through manipulation, through passive-aggressive remarks, it comes wearing a disguise. It wants to be accepted, it wants you to take it personally, it wants you to make it yours, but emotionally strong people don't fall for that trap. They recognize the moment a conversation shifts from truth to harm, from honest feedback to subtle jabs. And in that moment, they make a decision, a quiet, powerful decision, not today, not me, not ever. It's not that they don't feel it. Of course they do. They're human. They hear the sharp comment, they catch the sideways glance, they sense the jealousy hiding behind false praise. But they don't carry it home with them. They don't sit with it at night and let it echo through their heads until it becomes self-doubt. They know that what people say is often a mirror of their own insecurity, not a measure of your value. When someone tries to hurt you with their words or actions, it's almost never about you. It's about them, their pain, their fear, their lack of control, and once you understand that, really understand it, something shifts inside you. You stop personalizing poison. You stop confusing cruelty with truth. Emotionally strong people don't walk around with invisible wounds from every toxic interaction. They walk away. They don't replay the insult 100 times in their mind. They don't build stories around it. They don't take on someone else's brokenness and make it part of their identity. Why would they? That's like letting someone throw mud at you, and instead of washing it off, you rub it in. No, they see the mud, they see the intent behind it, and they wipe it clean before it sticks. That's what makes them strong. Not a lack of feeling, but a refusal to let those feelings be manipulated. And here's the thing, people will try. Oh yes, they'll test your limits. They'll push you, trigger you, poke at your insecurities just to see if they still have power over you. And the moment you rise above it, the moment you don't take the bait, they realize. Their grip on you is gone. That's when you know you're not just reacting. You're responding. You're leading yourself through the fire without letting it burn your spirit. There's a difference between hearing something and holding it. Emotionally strong people might hear cruel words, but they don't hold them. They don't take that negativity and wear it like a name tag. Instead, they ask themselves, does this serve me? Does this reflect who I am? And if the answer is no, they let it go quickly, quietly, and completely. What's powerful is they don't even need to prove the other person wrong. They don't launch into long defenses or try to win the argument. They already know their worth. They already know what they bring to the table. So when someone tries to poison the atmosphere with judgment or hate, they don't shrink. They don't lash out. They stand tall, anchored in truth, untouched by the venom. You want to shake someone who's emotionally strong. You can't, not with gossip, not with silent treatments, not with lies, because they see it for what it is, an attempt to transfer someone else's pain, and they say no, quietly, calmly, unapologetically. It's not about being better than anyone. It's about refusing to become someone else's emotional dumping ground. They don't retaliate. They don't stew in anger. They move on, not because they're weak, but because they know staying in toxic energy is the real weakness. And they've worked too hard to get where they are to let someone else's bitterness poison their peace. So no, they don't absorb the poison, they outgrow it, they walk past it, and most of all, they heal from the parts of themselves that used to believe they deserved it. Because the strongest people aren't the ones who never got hurt. They're the ones who stopped letting hurt define them. Let me know if you'd like this tailored for delivery or combined with other keynotes for a longer talk. Boundaries are non-negotiable, written in an emotionally impactful speech-style format without subheadings or a formal conclusion, just raw and compelling delivery. Boundaries are not suggestions, they're not flexible preferences. They are lines, clear, strong, and rooted in self-respect. For emotionally strong people, boundaries are non-negotiable. They don't set them as a way to punish others or create distance. They set them because their peace is sacred. Their energy is limited, their time is valuable, and they know that protecting these things is not selfish, it's necessary. The truth is, emotionally strong people have learned, sometimes the hard way, that without boundaries, people will take from you until there's nothing left. They'll drain you, guilt, trip you, and shape you into what works best for them. And if you let them, you lose yourself little by little in the name of keeping the peace. That's a peace built on your silence, a peace built on your sacrifice, and eventually it collapses. So they choose something different. They draw the line, not with anger, but with intention, not to hurt, but to heal, because boundaries are how strong people love themselves out loud. They don't scream for respect, they move in ways that demand it. You cancel on them repeatedly, they stop prioritizing you. You speak to them with disrespect, they end the conversation. You cross their emotional line. They step back not because they're dramatic, but because they've had enough of shrinking for the comfort of others. And yes, it makes people uncomfortable. People who benefited from your silence will always be disturbed by your boundaries. They'll call you distant, cold, difficult, but emotionally strong people are okay with being misunderstood if it means being mentally and emotionally well. They don't need to be liked by everyone. They need to be respected by themselves. And that internal respect, that's the foundation, that's the thing they protect with every boundary they set. It's not easy. Sometimes it means letting go of people you love. Sometimes it means walking away from situations you once begged to be part of. But emotionally strong people know anything that costs you your peace is too expensive. They don't chase people who cross the line. They let them go and they don't look back, because people who truly care about you will respect your boundaries. They won't mock them. They won't push them. They won't make you feel guilty for having them. And if someone does, that's your answer. Boundaries are the way strong people say, I will not abandon myself just to keep you comfortable. It's how they stay whole in a world that constantly asks them to break into pieces. It's how they protect their energy from constant emotional labor. It's how they avoid being everything for everyone and ending up being nothing for themselves. They don't feel the need to explain their limits to everyone either. No is a complete sentence to them. They don't write long paragraphs defending why they won't attend, why they won't engage, why they won't tolerate certain behaviors. They just don't, and they're okay if that makes others uncomfortable, because they've learned that the discomfort of others is not their responsibility, but their well-being is. And guess what? Setting boundaries doesn't mean they don't care. It means they care deeply about themselves and about the integrity of their relationships, because without boundaries, love becomes obligation, kindness becomes people-pleasing, and respect becomes one-sided. Strong people understand that real connection only happens when both people feel safe, seen, and honored, and that kind of space cannot exist without boundaries. They also don't wait for things to get toxic before they draw the line. They act early, they notice the red flags, the patterns, the manipulation, and they respond swiftly, quietly, with confidence. They've learned from experience that when you delay setting boundaries, the cost only grows. The longer you stay silent, the louder your pain becomes, and even when they're called too much, even when they're labeled as selfish, they don't flinch, they stay rooted, because emotional strength is not loud, it's consistent. It's in the way they protect their peace even when no one's watching. It's in the way they walk away from situations that once broke them. It's in the way they choose themselves, not out of pride, but out of survival. That's what makes boundaries so powerful. They're not walls, they're doors, with locks you control. Emotionally strong people don't slam those doors shut on everyone. They simply choose who gets access and who doesn't. And that choice, that's not cruelty, that's clarity, that's courage, that's strength. Let me know if you'd like this to match a specific speaking time or audience like workplace, youth, or leadership settings. Silence is their loudest response, crafted in a powerful, emotionally resonant tone with no subheadings and no formal conclusion. Just pure speech, style flow. Silence is not weakness. It's not surrender. It's not avoidance. For emotionally strong people, silence is strategy. Silence is power. It's the space where dignity lives and where self-respect stands taller than any argument could ever reach. When the world gets loud with criticism, manipulation, or drama, they don't shout back, they go still, because they've learned that not every insult deserves an explanation, not every confrontation deserves a reaction, and not every person deserves access to their energy. Some people thrive on chaos, they feed off your reaction, they bait you with petty jabs, expecting you to fight for your worth. But emotionally strong people, they don't take the bait, they know who they are, they know what they bring to the table. So instead of performing for someone else's satisfaction, they pause, they breathe, they stay centered, and in doing so, they confuse the very people who wanted to rattle them. Because nothing is more disarming than someone who refuses to be pulled into a war they never signed up for. They've discovered that silence can say what words never could. It says, "I'm not playing this game." It says, "You don't get to disturb my peace." It says, "I've outgrown this version of me that needed to prove something to people who never listened anyway." And that kind of silence, that's not passive, that's deliberate. It's the response of someone who's done explaining themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. You see, emotionally strong people understand the cost of constant engagement. They know that arguing with someone who refuses to listen is just another way of surrendering their power. So they don't try to win toxic battles. They don't try to change toxic minds. They let people think what they want. Why? Because their energy is not for rent. Their validation doesn't come from others. It comes from within, from a place so rooted in clarity that no storm can shake it. And yes, silence takes strength. It's easy to snap. It's easy to scream. It's easy to fire back with the same venom you were handed. But strength is in restraint. Strength is in knowing you could destroy with your words, but choosing not to. That's where true power lies, in control, not chaos. And emotionally strong people have trained themselves to master that control, not just for show, but because they value their peace more than being right. Some will misread that silence. They'll assume it's weakness, they'll call it indifference, they'll think they've won, but emotionally strong people don't need to correct the narrative. They let others talk, they let others spin stories. Because they know the truth doesn't need to scream to be real. And time always reveals what silence protected. Time shows who was genuine and who was performative. Time exposes motives, intentions, and character. So while others chase the last word, strong people chase inner peace. There's a kind of elegance in silence. It draws lines without raising a voice. It ends arguments without slamming doors. It says, "This is where I leave the chaos behind." It's the mature, grounded response of someone who's learned that not all reactions deserve your presence. And sometimes, the greatest display of emotional intelligence is simply not responding at all. Emotionally strong people know that silence can't be manipulated. Words can be twisted. Emotions can be used against you. But silence gives them nothing to work with. It's untouchable. It holds the high ground. It creates space for reflection, space for detachment, space for clarity to rise above confusion. And in that space, strong people find power, not over others, but over themselves. You'll see it in the way they walk away from disrespect without a single word. You'll see it in the way they let accusations hang in the air without chasing them down to explain. You'll see it when they don't attend the arguments they're invited to. Because to them, silence isn't just the absence of noise, it's the presence of self-respect. And when you've built that within you, you don't need to raise your voice to be heard. You just need to know who you are and what you stand for. So while the world shouts, blames, and provokes, they stay still. They stay silent, and in that silence, their strength speaks loudest of all, because emotional strength doesn't need applause or confrontation. It just needs the courage to walk away with your head held high and your peace still intact. Let me know if you'd like the same tone applied to the next keynotes. They control their emotions like prose, written in a strong, emotionally resonant voice without subheadings or a formal conclusion. Just a flowing, impactful delivery. They control their emotions like prose, not because they don't feel deeply, but because they do. In fact, it's their depth of emotion that has taught them the necessity of discipline. They've been through the moments where emotions ran wild, where anger burned bridges, where fear paralyzed action, where sadness drained every ounce of energy. They've seen the cost of reacting impulsively, of letting emotion take the wheel, and they've chosen a different path, a stronger path, one that doesn't deny emotion, but directs it. Emotionally strong people don't suppress what they feel. They acknowledge it, they sit with it, they understand that emotions aren't enemies, they are messengers, but they also know that messengers don't get to make decisions, so they listen, and then they lead. That's the difference. They don't let emotion become the driver of their words or their choices. They don't allow a temporary feeling to create a permanent regret. That's not control through avoidance, it's control through awareness. In a heated moment, they don't explode, they pause, they breathe. They remind themselves that their power lies in how they respond, not in how loud they can react. Anyone can yell when they're angry. Anyone can shut down when they're overwhelmed, but it takes real strength to stay present when your emotions beg you to run or rage. And emotionally strong people have practiced that strength over and over until it becomes second nature. They don't silence their emotions, they guide them. You won't often see them rattled, even when everything is falling apart. That's not because they're unaffected, but because they've mastered the art of self-regulation. They understand that panic only creates more chaos, so they steady themselves internally. They take the emotion, filter it through logic, and choose their next move with intention. That choice isn't robotic, it's courageous. It says, I will not let this emotion control me. I will feel it, but I will not become it. And it's not about being emotionless, far from it. Emotionally strong people feel everything, but they no longer give those feelings permission to sabotage their peace or poison their relationships. When they are angry, they don't aim to hurt. When they're sad, they don't fall into despair. When they're anxious, they don't let fear dictate their future. Instead, they ask themselves, what is this emotion trying to tell me? And how can I respond in a way that honors me, not harms me? That question changes everything, because while the world may expect impulsive reactions, they offer intentional responses. That's the power of control. It creates choice. And when you have choice, you have freedom. Freedom to pause, freedom to redirect, freedom to act from your values, not just your triggers. They've learned that reacting in the heat of the moment often leads to saying things you don't mean, doing things you regret, and damaging things you later wish you could fix. So they don't let a moment of emotion define their character. They give themselves space to feel, and then space to choose. That space, that's their secret weapon, because in that space, they reclaim their power. They don't give it away to the person who pushed their buttons or the situation that overwhelmed them. Even when someone disrespects them or tries to manipulate their emotions, they stay grounded. They see through the tactic. They know that the moment they lose their temper, they lose their advantage. So they stay calm, not because they're numb, but because they're wise. They've already calculated the cost of emotional outbursts, and they're not interested in paying that price again. You'll notice they're rarely reactive. And that might confuse some people, because we live in a world that glorifies instant reactions, hot takes, and emotional drama. But emotionally strong people are playing a different game, one of patience. One of precision. They know when to speak and when silence is more powerful. They know when to walk away and when to hold firm. And they know that the most dangerous person in the room is not the loudest. It's the one who feels deeply and still chooses restraint. They've earned that control through self-reflection, discipline, and growth. It didn't happen overnight. It came from falling, failing, and learning. It came from moments when they let emotion lead and saw the damage it did. But now they choose differently, and that choice is what makes them so powerful, because emotional control isn't about being cold. It's about being clear, clear on who you are, clear on what you value, clear on how you want to move through the world, even when the world tries to shake you. And when you have that clarity, you don't need to be loud to be strong. You just need to be in control of your emotions, your energy, and your response. Let me know when you're ready for the next keynote. They choose peace over drama, written in a powerful, emotionally engaging speech format without subheadings or a formal conclusion, just a flowing and realistic delivery. They choose peace over drama not because they're weak, not because they're afraid of confrontation, but because they know What drama costs? They've lived in the chaos, they've seen what it does to the mind, to the body, to the spirit, and they've made a conscious decision. I will not let unnecessary conflict define my life. They know what it's like to be pulled into other people's storms, to be consumed by gossip, to feel the sting of manipulation disguised as conversation. But now, they walk away from it calmly, quietly. Completely, emotionally strong people don't chase chaos. They don't thrive off conflict. They don't seek validation through drama. They've outgrown the need to be in the middle of everything. They no longer find excitement in emotional messiness. What excites them now is peace, real peace, the kind that lets them sleep at night, the kind that doesn't need to be defended, just protected, the kind that feels like clarity, like balance, like choosing yourself without apology. That doesn't mean they avoid real conversations, not at all. They're not afraid to address what needs to be said, but they don't turn everything into a war. They choose their battles with precision. They ask themselves, is this worth my energy? Will this lead to healing or more harm? And if the answer doesn't serve their peace, they simply don't engage. That's not avoidance. It's wisdom. It's emotional maturity. It's self-respect in action. There are people who live off drama, who create it, stir it, spread it, but emotionally strong people don't take the invitation. They've learned that not everything deserves a response, that not every conflict is theirs to carry, that sometimes the best way to win is not to participate. In that decision, it changes everything, because where there's no reaction, drama dies. They've learned how to stand in peace, even when chaos tries to knock at their door. They don't jump into arguments just because someone else is angry. They don't get dragged into emotional messes that aren't theirs to clean up. When people try to provoke them, they don't match the energy. They rise above it, not to feel superior, but to stay free, because drama is a trap. A trap that looks like relevance, attention, and power, but really it's a cage. And emotionally strong people don't live in cages. They live in freedom, freedom that comes from letting things go, from forgiving without needing an apology, from removing themselves from environments where tension is the default. They don't thrive in dysfunction, they get away from it, and when they can't walk away physically, they create space mentally, they build boundaries. Emotional walls with open hearts, doors with locks, and they decide who gets access to their peace. They're not interested in being right all the time. They don't need to have the last word. They're okay with people misunderstanding them, misjudging them, even resenting them, for as long as it means they didn't sacrifice their sanity for the sake of temporary approval. Because they've realized something powerful, not everyone deserves a front row seat to your life. Especially not those who bring noise instead of calm. So yes, they choose peace, over explaining, over defending, over being involved in everyone's issues. They don't fix people who don't want to be helped. They don't join the outrage just to fit in. They don't perform emotional labor for people who refuse to do their own healing. That's not coldness, that's clarity. That's a strong heart with clear boundaries. And they don't do it for show. They do it quietly. They do it daily, in the choices no one sees, in the moments they walk away from drama that tries to dress itself as concern, in the silence they keep when provoked, in the relationships they outgrow, in the environments they leave behind. Peace isn't something they wait for. It's something they create, and that creation takes strength, real, deep, anchored strength. They've chosen a life that protects their energy, guards their joy, and honors their emotional growth. So when faced with drama or peace, they don't hesitate. They don't entertain the noise. They've learned that what you entertain, you allow. And what you allow, you live with. So they choose differently now. They choose gently. They choose quietly. They choose peace. Every time. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the next keynote, or help tailor these for stage performance, video voiceover, or personal delivery. They know who they are, written in a speech-style format with emotional depth, realism, and flow. Without subheadings or a formal conclusion, they know who they are, and that knowing, that unshakable self-awareness. That's their foundation. That's the reason they don't bend every time the world tries to twist them into something else. Because when you know who you are, you stop needing approval to exist. You stop shifting to fit in. You stop apologizing for your truth just to be accepted in rooms that were never meant for you. Emotionally strong people have done the work. They've asked themselves the hard questions. Who am I when no one is watching? What do I value when no one's telling me what I should want? What breaks me? What builds me? They've faced their darkness, sat in it, learned from it, and they've come out with clarity. Not perfection, but truth. And when you have that kind of clarity, you move different. They don't get easily rattled by opinions. They don't chase likes, praise, or validation like oxygen. Sure, they hear feedback, but it doesn't shape their identity. Because they've already decided who they are, and that decision, it frees them. It gives them a kind of peace you can't fake. A peace that comes from alignment, not with the crowd, but with their core. They don't pretend to be fearless. They've got insecurities like anyone else. But what sets them apart is their willingness to confront them. They don't run from discomfort. They lean into it. They want to grow. They want to understand themselves fully, not just the parts that are easy to love, but the parts that used to hide in shame, the parts they once rejected. Now, they embrace it all. That's how deep their self-knowing runs. It's not surface-level confidence. It's earned. They've failed, been humbled, been told they weren't enough, but they didn't let that define them. They took it. They learned from it. They got better, not bitter. Because when you know who you are, you realize setbacks don't make you smaller. They make you sharper. They refine you, not reduce you. And so they keep rising, quietly, consistently, not to prove anything, but to honor everything they've become. They don't need a crowd to stand tall. They don't need applause to feel valuable. Their worth is internal. It's not up for debate. They're not arrogant. They're anchored in identity, anchored in values. Anchored in a voice they no longer silence to make others comfortable. When others project their insecurities onto them, they don't internalize it. They don't shrink under criticism or praise, because they know which voices matter and which ones are just noise. That kind of discernment only comes from deep, personal truth, and that truth protects them from manipulation, from false praise, from the pull of everything that looks shiny but is hollow inside. They don't say yes to everything. They don't force themselves into places that don't align. They don't wear masks to be loved. What you see is real, and if it's not received, they don't chase, they don't beg, they move on, not out of spite, but out of self-awareness. Because why stay in places that require you to forget who you are just to belong? They've stopped competing, stopped comparing. Their race is their own. Their journey is theirs alone. They celebrate others, but they don't lose themselves in the process. They know their pace, they trust their timing, and they've finally stopped asking for permission to be exactly who they are. That's what makes them powerful, not loudness, not dominance, but authenticity. A kind of authenticity that doesn't flex, it just is. It lives in their choices, in their boundaries, in their presence. You can feel it before they even speak. There's a calm in someone who knows themselves. A quiet confidence that can't be taught, only discovered. They know who they are, which means they also know who they are not. And that clarity helps them say no without guilt, walk away without anger, let go without regret. They don't force connections. They don't cling to identities that no longer fit. They grow, and with every level of growth, they refine their sense of self even more. It's not that they think they've arrived. They're always learning, always evolving, but the difference is, they're not lost in that process. They're not molding themselves to fit anyone's expectations. They're becoming more of who they already are. And that alignment, that authenticity, it's their power, it's their peace, it's their compass in a world that's constantly trying to tell them who to be.